Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's session dedicated to inclusive health coverage for all the citizens of India. Our focus today is on a powerful and timely topic: decoding inclusion, disability rights, and health insurance in India. I'm your host, Subhangi, and I'm honored to be guiding you through this important conversation. Inclusive health coverage. It's more than a policy goal. It is a foundation for dignity, security, and equal opportunity for disabled people and other vulnerable groups. When health systems are built around inclusion, they help the entire country flourish as a whole. But often, our system and our society fall short in supporting these vulnerable groups. To help us understand this better, we have Ms. Sara Chawla with us. She is the Chief Program and Strategy Officer of My Action for the Disabled MAD Foundation. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. In fact, I'm really delighted to be a part of such a meaningful conversation, as I believe.
Yes, ma'am, it is indeed a privilege to have you here with us.
Thank you.
So, to begin with, we often have come across at railway stations or traffic signals a disabled people, particularly from underprivileged backgrounds, asking for food or money, or they are in just very poor conditions by the side. But very, very few people actually on the road or on the go stop to consider that they are also a part of this country, right? Let alone question if there is a proper set of rules to protect them, or even if there are they implemented well, or are there major gaps present? You are well acquainted in this field. So, from your expert perspective, could you elaborate on the current framework present for supporting the rights of disabled people in India, and also throw light on how well do you think these laws are implemented in supporting them?
Yes, when we talk about disabled people asking for food and money, we're not talking about the lack of laws over here. We're talking about the gaps in enforcement. So, as an advocate myself, I know that there are general and specific laws that address these exploitations, right? So, when we talk about this, the very first thing we address is the Constitution. The Constitution has fundamental rights. It's the this Article 14 gives the right to equality. So when we're talking about disabled people on the streets, and when we see them as objects of charity rather than people themselves, we're actually violating that right to equality that is guaranteed under Article 14 of the Constitution. And it's a fundamental right which cannot be ignored at any cost. And the second thing is that Article 21 under the Constitution itself, it provides the right to life with dignity. And if disabled people are there on the streets begging for food and money, then that's not a dignified life, let's be honest. And that directly violates Article 21, a fundamental right to life with dignity. And the third thing under the Constitution itself is Article 41. So, under Article 41, it's the state's obligation to publicly assist the people with disability, right? So, these three are the very principal provisions, I would say, under the Constitution itself, which is a general law which applies to the entire nation. And the next principal law is the rights of people with disability. That's RPWD Act 2016. And under that law itself, Section 3 provides non-discriminatory practices. So there is a prohibition on discrimination against the people with disability under this law. And under the Section 24 to 26 of this Act, there needs to be affordable housing, social security provisions, and healthcare for people with disability. These are the two very primary laws, rules, and legislations which address these issues of people with disability begging on the streets or who do not have these appropriate accommodations, residence, or economic privileges, as I would say. And under this, if we're talking about this concern, and there was this one judgment actually. So the court in this Rajiv Raturi versus Union of India, the court itself said that affordable accommodation is a very fundamental right to dignity, which falls under the Constitution. So that cannot be ignored. And I think the problem is not in the denial of law. The problem is the exclusion in the practice. So enforcement has to be audited. The enforcement has to be taken care. Only then this problem can be addressed. Otherwise, we have all the policies and laws that we need.
So the gap lies in the implementation and the enforcement, not in the framework itself. Because the framework is
Exactly.
there to help and support, but the problem lies in the interpretation of them and implementation, right?
Yes,
Yes, ma'am. So there is this white paper on inclusive health coverage for all. We know that India is a signatory to the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, which explicitly prohibits discrimination on health insurance. Yet, the survey from this white paper revealed that nearly 80% of people with disabilities have no insurance, health insurance at all. Why do you think this international commitment has failed to translate into the ground? Yeah, it is just a lawful precedent at the moment. How it has not reached the people on the ground? And as someone who is well acquainted and has an extensive experience in this field, can you tell us about the white paper itself? What is it? What does it stand for?
of course. So the white paper was authored and published by the National Center for Promotion of Employment for People with Disability, and it covered 34 states across India, and also included about 5,000 the persons with disability for their surveys. And the very devastating, I would say, the devastating result of this white paper was that 80% of the people do not have health insurance, right? And this, I would say that the major problem here is not the policy, but the awareness itself, and the systematic barriers that come with high cost premiums, or which come with lack of awareness. So the survey, I remember this reading this paper and seeing the survey where it was very explicitly mentioned that about 40% of the people are not aware of the health insurance benefits, or that there are health insurance policies for them. And the question arises, this international commitments, right? Like you asked me right now. So
Yes.
yes, India is a signatory. India is a signatory, but in India we follow a system in international law which is the dualistic system. And in this system, we cannot implement international commitments in India until and unless there is a legislation for it, right? And
Yes.
I remember this case wherein the state of Rajasthan versus Union of India. So the court clarified this point. It said that when we have to implement an international commitment in India, we need a proper legislation for it. We'll have to enact a law to implement that commitment. It doesn't mean that if we've signed that commitment, it doesn't mean that it will be implemented in India as it is. So the problem lies in the enactment of that international commitment. And actually, not even that, because we have these laws, we have RPWD Act, we
Yes.
have the Constitution, we have the provisions for these commitments. And again, the problem lies in enforcement, implementation, and interpretation. So we need that implementation, we need the accessibility audits, we need compliance, and not the formal compliance, because the formal compliance is there on the paper. We have the policies written down. But the problem is the symbolic compliance of these commitments and these provisions that we already have in India. This is the major problem right now actually, in applying this, implementing these international commitments.
So we have like taken examples, like the white paper also mentions it, and we also know that, if we take global examples like Australia's National Disability Insurance Scheme (NDIS) or Canada's assistive device programs, what lessons can India adapt within its own system when it comes to strengthening inclusive health insurances?
Right. So first, to give a context to the this question, I would like to just brief on what exactly these global precedences are set. So in Australia, there are policies which take into consideration the disabilities as social responsibility, right? It's it's a community responsibility to help out people with disability. It's not a risk, it's not a burden, because in India right now the major problem is that disability is taken as a risk and a burden on the economy. Okay. And Australia has addressed and bridged this one problem. It has taken disability as a social responsibility rather than a burden. And this is
Yes.
one lesson that India needs right now. Otherwise, there can't be any formal improvement in the system. First, we need to address this, that disability is the community responsibility, it is not a
Yes.
burden on the state. And
Yes.
secondly, Canada has implemented this health insurance and health coverage in the country, wherein they provide rehabilitation and assistive devices. They fund those assistive devices which are significant for people with disability. And India does not have any kind of provision for this. We don't have a policy which provides rehabilitation and assistive technology to the people with disability. So these two examples, they form a very significant part of what potentially India needs in its policies, laws, legislations, and provisions. So, what India lesson the lessons that we get from these global examples is that we need rehabilitation in our health coverage. We need public funding for assistive technologies for people with disability. And thirdly, we need to make it a social responsibility rather than a risk on the state. So these three lessons, I would say, are the most important from what I've gathered from the white paper. These are the most important things that India needs to address and India needs to improve in its policies and laws.
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
one thing.
Yeah, ma'am, we talked about how we can take examples from them. I think when it comes to accessibility measures as well, there is also a lot of gaps, because outside disabled people, not outside, like in most of the Western countries, when people are standing in queue, disabled people are given priority, right?
Hmm.
Here, most people ignore when these people come for some sort of assistance, right? We seldom see them. And
Hmm.
also ramps for getting into public vehicles, like we were talking about the other day, and all this kind of accessibility services, I think India lacks there too, right?
Yes, absolutely it does, because we don't have ramps, we don't have the functional elevators, lifts for wheelchair. So the infrastructure would be wheelchair accessible. We don't have that in India right now. In most of the places, we don't. We have that written down. We have accessible infrastructure in our fundamental rights. But then again, we don't have the implementation for that. And that's a major gap that India needs to cover up with public funding. We need public
Yes, ma'am.
funding for that. And for public funding, we need to address that need first. And
Yeah.
to be aware of that need, people need to be aware of this need of theirs, that we need infrastructure, we need accessibility, and we need accessibility audits by the government itself. Because without compliance, there is not going to be any improvement, even if we have all the policies and laws laid down. Let's be very honest about that.
Yes, ma'am. I think India is making small steps, like I have seen many inclusive toilets nowadays, right? Which are
Mm-hmm.
disable friendly. I think small steps, but hopefully someday we reach there. Talking about policies, we have the Ayushman Bharat mission, right, and the PMJ, which includes
Yeah.
all senior citizens above 70 years of age, regardless of
Hmm.
income. Like they should be included in all sorts of health insurances. But when it comes to disabled people, they are conditionally included. How defensible is this distinction, and can it be challenged legally? Have you personally assisted someone at MAD NGO regarding this?
So yes, this was a very, very, I would say a very wise decision of this Ayushman Bharat, wherein they helped out senior citizens above the age of 70. But where it lagged was the conditional inclusion of people with disability. There, I think that was the one loophole which needed to be filled up in this scheme. And it's a very vulnerable distinction under the Constitution itself, because under Article 14, as I said, arbitrary practice by the state is violative of Article 14. So when we take into account that vulnerable position of the senior citizens is ample factor for applying Ayushman Bharat like it is. We need that factor to be applied to persons with disability as well, because PWD people, the persons with disabilities, they have this vulnerability, and it's sometimes it's lifelong. And if we are taking into account vulnerable position to apply Ayushman Bharat, then unconditional inclusion of persons with disability is a must. And how can this be defended is, there are two ways actually. One is active litigation. Under this, we can apply for public interest litigation (PIL). We can file for a PIL, wherein a person or a group of persons, they file a PIL in the courts for the betterment of either the society as a whole or for a specific community of people. So PIL can be filed for that. And the other thing is policy advocacy. And where policy advocacy comes in is that when we apply Ayushman Bharat for senior citizens above 70 unconditionally, then it sets a precedence. And this precedence can be taken into court so that this scheme is applied unconditionally for people with disability as well, right? So if we are not engaging in active litigation, then going for this precedence and policy advocacy is the second most effective way to get it applied for people with disability as well. So these are two methods that can defend this distinction, or the scheme which has very arbitrarily, or I would say very conditionally applied for people with disability and unconditional for senior citizens. So yes, this is defensible. It can be defended.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That's great. I'm sure a lot of people who are going through similar situations are taking notes, or getting influenced by your words. Now we are coming to mental disabilities, right? Mental disabilities, when people often face unique challenges, right? Even though the Mental Health Care Act 2017 provides legal protection for people with such conditions, in reality, many individuals still struggle to get coverage or experience claim rejections or denials. You have been involved with physically as well as mentally disabled people, right? So how effectively has this new law been put into action within the systems, and where do you think it still falls short? It's not new, but comparatively new, right? So how do you think the implementation of it is going?
So, Mental Health Care Act in 2017 was actually a profound law which was passed for upliftment of the people with mental illnesses, right? So, on the paper again, it mandates that they are not discriminated against, that all the facilities which are provided under this People with Disability Act and for other citizens, they are applied for persons with mental illnesses as well. But the problem is that in India, we take mental health care as secondary. We don't take it as a primary disability. And this was very well pointed by the court under this under a case which was titled Shikha Nischal versus Union of India, or the National Health Insurance Company. So in this, the court was actually it condemned the fact that mental illness is not taken as a primary disability. So this person who filed the complaint, she was discriminated against. She was not provided health insurance. She was denied health insurance, and that's why she filed a case in the court. And the court said that denying health insurance on the factor of mental illness is actually violative of right to dignity under Article 21. So, Healthcare Act, it provides a mandate. It says that people with mental illnesses are to be provided with all the facilities. It's mandatory, and they cannot be discriminated against. But then again, the enforcement says that mental health care is a secondary problem. It's not taken as a primary problem. So for this to work out, for this legislation to work out, first we need awareness. Okay, we need awareness that mental health is a primary issue which has to be addressed. And second thing is the audit of the enforcement of the enactment. And the third thing is that consequences need to be there when these provisions are not followed. When there is a violation, there need to be consequences to that. Otherwise, the compliance is not going to be symbolic. The compliance is just going to be a formal thing which is already written down on the paper,
Yeah,
and it's
just
not
gonna be
enough.
for the pages. Yeah,
Exactly, and it's not
yeah,
enough. So we
yeah.
need to take this as a primary issue, mental health. It cannot be taken as a secondary option. Mental illness is a disability, and it has to be taken in its weightage. That's absolutely important.
Yeah, I think it is deep rooted in our society as well, right? Like a lot of millennial parents, when they come to know that
Mhm.
their child might be going through ADHD, PTSD, something like this, they
Yes.
often laugh it off or mock it off by
Hmm.
saying that it's just a phase, right? So I think
Yeah.
India really needs to, not India, like a particular group of people, a lot of people are there. They really need to broaden their mentality in terms of accepting mental health issues, that they exist and they matter and they need protection, right?
Exactly.
Yes,
Because
ma'am.
legal
Thank you, ma'am.
enforcement is
Yeah,
not everything. We can't counter
exactly.
societal prejudices with legal action. That's the thing.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I'm sure a lot of people will get a lot of influence from this and they will learn a lot too. So, we will be
Hmm.
now moving on to our rapid fire round where I'll be asking you a series of quick questions and I'd
Yeah.
expect you to answer them briefly. Okay.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
question one: does India currently offer truly inclusive health insurance for persons with disabilities?
Okay. So the quick answer to this is that health insurance, yes, it's provided. Inclusive, no, it's not. It's not inclusive, but the health insurance coverage is present.
Are mental health disabilities treated at par with physical disabilities by health insurers?
No, not in practice. It's there on paper, but in practice and enforcement, no, they are not provided.
Okay, ma'am. One word to describe enforcement of India's disability rights in health insurance today.
The most appropriate one is fragmented. Enforcement is absolutely fragmented.
Yeah, it's in pieces, right? So, if you could name one law that insurers most frequently fail to comply with.
Rights for people with disability 2016, the most
16.
primary statute, which is ignored.
I hope they are taking notes because I don't know. Like as I said in the beginning, in order to flourish as a country altogether, we really need to uplift these things, right? Do you believe there
Exactly.
should be stricter laws or punishments for abusing vulnerable groups like disabled people.
Absolutely. Without hesitation, I would say that there need to be stricter implementation. There needs to be stricter punishment for people who do not comply with these provisions, because without compliance, without consequences, there is not going to be compliance, let's be honest.
So, flowing from that question into my last question to you, we
Hmm.
are just about to step into 2026. Okay, and this
Oh.
coming year we will mark our 80th Independence Day. Still,
Hmm.
terms like langra, bhenga, abnormal, andha are used as terms for mockery and taunting,
Hmm.
right? Not as terms for
Yeah.
sympathy or consideration.
True.
As
Hmm.
my action for disabled CPS, so what is your personal opinion on this, and how do you think as a society we can evolve for becoming more inclusive?
So, as I said before, that prejudices cannot be countered by legal action alone. We need proper mindset for that, and for proper mindset, we need awareness, right? And right now, what the definition of normal and functioning is, it's efficiency, and that's why the state doesn't recognize people with disability as truly the part of this society as a whole. So I would say that the very first thing that we need to address is that the definition of normal is not efficiency. The definition of normal has to be human diversity, especially in India where we see a lot of categories of people, right? And in
Yes.
this worldwide as well, actually, not just in India. Human diversity has to be addressed, and it has to be the new definition of normal and functioning, not just efficiency. So that is one very important thing that we need. And
Yes.
talking about this independence, I would say that being truly independent is the inclusion of all minds and bodies, not just the ones who are visible. Okay,
Yes.
so being visible truly in a country and being visible only in policies, that's not something that we aspire to be. We need that visibility in policies, we need that visibility in enforcement, and um, as a very significant part of MAD Foundation, I would say that career development is a very important aspect for people with disability right now, because we need people with disability in fields where we want improvement. If we want
Yes.
improvement in health coverage, then we need our people to be there in the field. We need that career development of those people. We need people with disability to be present in the fields where they want improvement, where they want upliftment. So this is one goal that we have in Mad Foundation right now. We
That's
are
great, ma'am.
aspiring to uplift people through career guidance, and this is very important if we want
Yes.
that upliftment reflected in real life. That's what I would say for
Yes.
2026. Our aspirations.
That's a great motto and motivation to start 2026 with. Thank you
Yeah,
so much,
yeah.
ma'am. That's so great. I'm sure your insights and guidance on inclusive health coverage and disability rights have inspired all of us to think about the changes our society and obviously our system needs. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
And to our audience, as we reflect on the barriers that people with disabilities face in accessing timely and affordable healthcare, let us remember that true inclusion is not just a policy, it is about empathy, dignity, and justice. Thank you all for joining us in this meaningful conversation and for being part of the movement to build a society, our society, where everyone, regardless of ability, can thrive.